Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Episode 387. And I'm going to give you a couple of preliminary thoughts before I dive into today's podcast. And it has to do with process, how things get on Casting Across. And you'll see why I'm talking about this, because I actually have a request. I have an ask for you, the listener. So a lot of times, if something's not super straightforward, like, I have a product I want to talk about, I have a book I want to review, and that's either on the podcast or on the website or on YouTube, the thoughts for the other articles, whether they be a technique or whether it be kind of a commentary, those come to me as I am writing something else, as I'm reading something else, as I'm, just thinking. A lot of times I'm thinking about sermon prep. I will think about a fly fishing topic and vice versa. And then I go to the next stage, which is this a better podcast topic or is this something I should write about? And inevitably, what will happen is that after I've written, I think, I could talk about this for 20 minutes. Or after I talk about it for 20 minutes, I could say, I could condense this down into a 600-word article that would be really easier for someone to digest as they were reading it on their phone or on their computer. And this particular topic that I'm talking about today, you've already seen the title, I assume, is something that I thought, I'm going to write about this. But then as I got thinking about it, I was actually on a run, a couple of runs, and I was thinking through what I wanted to say, and a lot of the things I thought, it'd be kind of cool to kind of throw it out there, give my perspectives, give my thoughts, give some anecdotes, give some examples, and if anyone wants to write in, Matthew at castingacross.com, with their thoughts, then that would kind of help form how I write about this or talk about this in the future. I mean, I have my opinions, and I think they're pretty decent, right? But I'm also interested to hear what you think. But that also gives me an opportunity to say that we're coming up on another Accusations episode where I do listener and reader feedback. So once again, let me know, Matthew at castingacross.com. Well, we are like 10% done with the podcast already, and I haven't even talked about what I'm talking about, and you're probably interested in that, and that's why you clicked on this. And that is, the elite fly fisher is dead. Long live the elite fly fisher. What do I mean by that? Well, it is a long-standing trope. And I mean that, trope. I don't think that it's as real as we make it out to be. It's a long-standing trope that fly fishers are elitist. But I think we've turned a corner. And I actually think that the ones that were championing the downfall of the elitist fly fisher 15, 20 years ago have now become what they sought to destroy. So let's talk about that. All right, let's start at the beginning. Not the very beginning. We're not going to Mesopotamia. We're not even going to Dame Juliana or Isaac Walton. We're not even necessarily talking about Charles Orvis in the 19th century, okay? What are we talking about? We're talking about where this idea of fly fishers being elitist kind of came into vogue and came to the fore. And certainly you could point at earlier parts of the 20th century. But at the same time, the vast majority of fly rods, and this bears testimony just going on Facebook Marketplace, the vast majority of fly rods that were being manufactured, sold, and used in the middle of the 20th century were very inexpensive, dime store, hardware store, either bamboo and then fiberglass fly rods, okay? So not everybody was throwing the really high-end stuff that, if you had, you wouldn't fish it anymore, you'd have it up on your wall. Okay, so fly fishing was certainly not an elite activity in the middle of the 20th century. Were there those that were using the highest end equipment? Yes, but they were a small minority. However, you move into the 80s and then the 90s, and I think that the 90s are really a touch point for this, and a few things go into that. If I had to pick one moment, a lot of things changed, and a lot of you will back me up on this. Those of you who are much more aware of fly fishing, because I started fly fishing in like 1996 or 7, right? And it was River Runs Through It. When that movie came out, Brad Pitt, Robert Redford, a lot of people thought, I not only want to do that, I want to look like that. It was the aesthetic. And, you had a company like Orvis that was still selling that aesthetic, and it was fantastic for them. And, that's when I started fly fishing. So there's a lot of nostalgia around that for me. But I think this is where you had the elitism kind of come to a flashpoint in the fly fishing community. And it wasn't necessarily a fly fishing verse, because yes, I think bait fishers will say, oh, fly fishers are elitist with their expensive gear and their fancy waders and they're throwing fish back. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the reason why we have that stereotype. I think you could also say it's age-based. You have, old people doing it, and they don't want to spend time having young kids do it. I experienced that when I was a new fly fisher, but that's true with any and every hobby. You could say there's socioeconomic stuff, blah, 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 and I'm sure that's true to a certain degree, but at the same time, I don't think that's the primary reason why you had this stereotype. I think the primary reason why the image of the elitist fly fisher came to the fore was because you had people who had been doing it for quite a while, and then an influx of people doing it that weren't just doing it, but because of the financial commercial situation in the 90s, started doing it with better equipment than a lot of what the established fly fishers were doing. And so you had the situation where people go and see River Runs Through It. They go out to a company like Orvis, and they spend $5,000. And I was working there in the late 90s or in early 2000s, so I got the missions. Happy to do that. And then they turned around, not knowing, a nymph from their net. They're out there in the middle of the river, and the people that had been there, that had this water to themselves, are now saying, you don't belong here. That is a stereotype. That is an overgeneralization. But I can say that happened enough where it was a worthwhile moniker to throw on some people that they were being elitist, okay? So, hear me. Tweed is not elitist. Bamboo fly rods are not elitist. Having, right, is not elitist. Knowing where to fish, having fished there before, none of those things are. It was simply, I think, this tension between the new crowd and the old crowd. And let me qualify that. Certain members of the old crowd. All right. So that's, I think, where this idea came from. But like I said, we're talking late 90s, early 2000s. And I was a teenager, and I was in my 20s at the time. And my experience, again, working at a company like Orvis, being heavily involved in Trout Unlimited, both in their normal functions and in youth education, and then doing fly casting instruction and guiding, I did not see the vast majority of the people that I worked with that were elitist, at least from my perspective. Certainly, I'd have people that would come and say thought they knew more than they certainly did, or knew more than I did because they'd been doing it for a while. But at the same time, I had that experience when I sold cars. I had that experience when I was working at a gym. I've had that experience in ministry, right? So I don't think that is a thing that is exclusive to fly fishing. That's a human thing, right? Well, as this new guard came in, a lot of things began to change, and you started to see this really more so as you moved out of the aughts into the 2010s, and the aesthetics of fly fishing really began to change, right? The aesthetics of fly fishing really became much brighter, much more loud. And there was really a catering to a younger crowd. And I can remember it distinctly. I don't remember the year. It's probably 12 or 13 years ago now, but TU in their magazine Trout ran an article about like the new breed of fly fisher. And a lot of you probably remember this. And there was a full page picture of a guy, just kind of, short sleeves and, big sunglasses, wading across the river with a beer in his hand. Oh, and oh my heavens, there was an uproar. And there's a lot of reasons that this happened, but I think it also showed that there was this lingering old guard mentality. Now, some people had concerns about the consumption of alcohol in the river, but I think more of it was just this image, like this is not what we want fly fishing to be. But it had already happened. And if it hadn't already happened then, it's certainly happened by now. I even think about going to the big fly fishing shows, the one here in Boston, the one outside of New York that's in New Jersey. And that is more of the aesthetic, even among those who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, than it is buttoned up, casting shirt with the cape, tweed jacket, and Wellington boots, right? That's definitely where we are now. At the same time, you still get people saying, oh, fly fishing is elitist. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think fly fishing, the industry, so many of the conservation organizations, so much of the media actually caters to this new crowd, this new wave, this new aesthetic, this new blood, and that's all fine and good. Certainly there are some brands that maintain a little bit of a nostalgic, aesthetic. There are some publications that kind of tap into tradition and legacy, but that does not comport with elitism. Those things don't necessarily, they don't correlate in the sense of causation, right? They do run along, parallel lines, but it doesn't mean that they are intrinsically connected. But so that's premise one. Premise one is that there was some elitism. It wasn't as rampant as people maintain, but it really waned in about 20 to 15 years ago. And even that, I think I'm being a little bit conservative in that estimation. But what has taken its place? What's taken its place is a new kind of elitism. And this is what I see in folks that it comes across a couple ways. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is, if people really knew how to fly fish and what fly fishing is about, this is how they would do it. Okay, so you see this with people who are pro Euro nymphing. You see this with people who are pro small business. You see this with people who are about particular secondary environmental or conservation causes. Okay, so hear me. I have no problem with Euro nymphing. Not my favorite thing to do. Probably makes up 5% of my fly fishing, right? I have no problem with supporting small businesses. You'll hear me sing the praises of small companies as much as you'll hear me sing the praises of the large companies. Because again, the large fly fishing companies aren't that large to begin with, right? And I'm all for conservation and environmental causes. But you see this dogmatism within kind of this kind of messaging in social media, as well as in messaging from branding, and with voices within fly fishing saying this is how, this is what legitimate, authentic fly fishing is. And so here's the pendulum swing, right? Authentic fly fishing is not the tweed jacket, the bamboo fly rod, and legacy companies like Orvis and Winston, right? It's no longer that. It's all of this new stuff. This is authenticity. But I think what those folks are missing is that the elitist imagery, and not imagery, but the elitist title never was from that imagery, never was from those brands. It was a mindset. It was a mentality. That's what created the barrier of entry, more so than any other demographic that you can pick out. Socioeconomic, access to this, ethnicity, any stuff like that. It was a mindset. And again, it's always the heart of people. It's always the heart of people. Systems are an outflow of the heart of people. But now you have the pendulum swing to the other side, and you have hearts that say, I want it to be this way. Fly fishing is this. We are the custodians of fly fishing. This is the aesthetic. This is the messaging. This is the branding. This is how it ought to be done. So what we have is we have a revolution. We don't have a reformation. Now, let me couch all this, right? 15 minutes in saying the vast majority of fly fishers, and probably the vast majority of listeners out there, this isn't on your radar. You don't care about this. You want to catch more fish. You want to catch bigger fish. You want to catch more fish more days of the week. You want to get your friends and your family into it, and you want to get more out of it. But at the same time, because of that drive, because of that excitement, because of that investment that you're making, you are inevitably listening to voices. Mine being one by default. I mean, if you're hearing me, you're hearing my voice. You read things. You digest things through social media, through magazines, through books. You probably watch YouTube videos. You probably go to events, or you go to fly shops or otherwise, where you are hearing from people. But this is why this, I think, is worth talking about. It's simply for to demolish this straw man that is thrown at people that have a certain look, people of a certain age. It's discrimination of the kind that we're told you can't be discriminatory towards. And consequently, if you're discriminating in that way, saying, oh, you're bad, you're elitist, while at the same time, this is the way you have to do it, well, I think that the pot has certain things to say about the kettle and the color of its finish. So what do we do about this? What do we do? Well, here's the first thing. Be nice. Be kind. Be patient. Remember, we're all in this together. The wading boots of the prince and the wading boots of the pauper are standing in the same river, okay? The one who is casting the composite fly rod they picked up at Dick's Sporting Goods, and the one who's casting the handmade or antique bamboo fly rod that costs 200 times as much. They're both supporting the same thing, which is preservation of cold water resources, which is handing down this wonderful legacy. It's certainly not pragmatic fly fishing. It's certainly not utilitarian. It is more work than it needs to be, but we enjoy it, and we're handing it down to the next generation. And I think this is just such an important thing to recall, an important thing to remember, is that this is not an elitist activity. Yeah, in the same way that driving a car is elitist. I mean, I have a humble little SUV, right? Nicest car I've ever owned, but still a humble little SUV. You can drive things that are infinitely nicer than this, but guess what? We drive on the same roads, okay? And we both pay taxes to maintain those same roads. You go across the board, and fly fishing, like almost every other outdoor pursuit, is a great equalizer. So that's kind of point one. Point two, if you are younger, if you are excited about the contemporary ways of fly fishing, don't be dogmatic about it. Don't be dogmatic in your mind as an equal and opposite reaction to the way that somebody else is being dogmatic. That is never a reason to take a stand. We don't take a stand from an oppositional perspective. We only take a stand for something we believe in. And if you believe in, again, dry flies only, awesome. That's fantastic. If I could only fish dry flies and catch all the fish that I catch while I'm fishing streamers and fishing nymphs, then yes, I would absolutely fish all dry flies. If you think there's a particular look that makes you feel good when you go fly fishing, whether it is a tweed jacket or whether it is a 3-pack Hanes white undershirt, ribbed undershirt, they have another name for them, which I don't know, probably answer for saying that, then that's awesome. Go out and do it. Wear it. Carp, Atlantic salmon. Anything in between. See, even there, making a value judgment. Atlantic salmon are objectively better than carp, right? But that's okay. If someone is completely content fishing for carp, that's great. But that person doesn't have a higher moral standing, is not better in some sort of objective and certainly subjective criteria in fly fishing. So there you go. Maybe you can say, Matt, that was almost like you were saying your perspective, that everyone's perspective is valid is the best perspective. Wouldn't that make you elitist? No, it doesn't. That's bad logic. So again, maybe just some food for thought. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you have thoughts on this, if you or someone you love has been the victim of fly fishing elitism, either 25 years ago or today, contact Casting Across, Matthew at castingacross.com. I will not represent you legally, but I'm interested in hearing what you think about this thesis that I've put out there, that those who were being criticized by the group that has historically been called the fly fishing elitists is now become the fly fishing elitists themselves, saying this is the way that fly fishing ought to be, not that. Yeah, interested in hearing what you have to say. All right, so I've written some other things this week. On Monday, Dark Skies Fly Fishing, April-May 2026. So newest issue of Dark Skies Fly Fishing came out. I am not looking at it. The print copy has not showed up yet. That's okay. It's hot off the presses. But the digital copy is out there. Some really good articles, two from me. One is on small stream fly rods, another is a book review. So if you are interested in either of those or a number of other interesting topics by a wide range of good fly fishing authors, then go check out Dark Skies Fly Fishing. You can subscribe online, you can read a sample, but neither of my pieces are included in that sample. So you'll have to pony up the big bucks. Well, that's actually small bucks if you want to read what I wrote. Wednesday's article is called Video, the Top 5 Fly Fishing Books on Amazon. Now, this is one of those things that I was going to write, and I'm like, no, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to make a video about this. And if you go on Amazon, you can read a list or look at a list of the top 10 fishing books. And if you know a thing or two about what each of those books is and are, then you can pick out which ones are fly fishing. And so even in the top 10 fishing books on Amazon, there were 5 fly fishing books. So I outlined those. I had 3 in my possession. That's pretty cool. And that's what that video was. So you can check that on YouTube, or you can go see that over at castingacross.com. This week's recommendation on the podcast is a brand new book, Introduction to Fly Fishing by Michael Klimkos. I'll be writing about this here in the near future, but I've only flipped through it and read portions of it. But Mike was one of my fly fishing mentors, and he put this book together both as a fun personal project as well as for a fly shop that he works for in Pennsylvania that they can use some of their education programs. But it is no nonsense. It is all him with input from some well-respected anglers in South Central PA. It is comprehensive, it is exhaustive, and it comes from decades of experience on the water. It's not flashy, but it will do the trick. Mike has also a lot of experience with education, particularly teaching kids how to fly fish, teenagers how to fly fish. So this is not aimed for them, but with that in mind, you know that the content is going to be approachable and it's going to be applicable. So I'll put a link for where you can get Mike's book, Introduction to Fly Fishing, at the show notes for this podcast page over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app. Rate the podcast in Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com, where there's 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
Outdoors isn't just a place, it's a lifestyle. Experience the action and unforgettable stories with Silver Kings, Sundays at 8 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV, wherever adventure takes you. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.